For those who don't know me, my name is Councillor Martin Walton, and I'll be chairing this committee during this year. As this is the first meeting cycle this year, I've allowed everyone to introduce themselves. So I'll start to allow me.
Councillor Michael Butcher for Cricket Green.
Councillor Edith Macaulay, Lavender Fields Ward.
Councillor Billy Hayes for Draveney Ward.
Councillor Caroline Charles, the Ravensbury Ward.
Councillor James Williscroft, Lower Morley Ward.
Richard Seedhouse, the clerk for the committee.
Councillor Martin Wilson.
Louise Round, the Council's Monitoring Officer.
I'm John Berry, Head of Development Management and Building Control.
Margaret Cullerton, Head of Internal Audit.
Michael Patterson, Councillor for Cannon Thorne Ward. Sean Braithwaite, Councillor for Abbey Ward.
John Oliver, Councillor for Westlands Ward. Robert Page, another councillor for Westlands.
Victoria Wilson, Councillor for Rains Park.
Ruth Herrick, Complaints Manager.
Fantastic. And I'd like to welcome the work experience students who are here to observe that. I hope you find it very worthwhile. So we'll go then to apologies for absence. I received apologies from Councillor Pym, who's been substituted by Councillor Butcher, and Councillor Speak, who's been substituted by Councillor Williscroft. And independents joining online is Katie Wilson and Clive Douglas. I don't know, are they with us yet?
Katie's with us, Clive will try and show.
I'd like to introduce you, welcome you, Katie, to the meeting. Thank you. Should we go on to declarations of interest? Does anyone have any declarations of interest they wish to declare? That's a no. We move on then to the minutes of the meeting held on the 27th of April 2023. Are they agreed? Agreed. We now move on to agenda item number 4, annual governance statement, and I'd like to invite the Head of Internal Audit, Margaret Cullerton, to address the committee. Margaret.
Thank you, Chair. This report covers the annual governance statement, which is set out in Appendix A of the report. Local authorities are required to complete an annual governance review in accordance with the SIPFA SOLIS guidance to meet the statutory requirements of the accounts and audit regulations. The AGS is agreed by this committee and then is required to be signed by the Chief Exec and the Leader of the Council. The report is published with the Council's accounts. The assessment for this year involved discussions with key officers, evidence gathered, external assurances, and completion of a self-assessment by senior officers. It is set out following the SIPFA principles, and it is understood that it should be done in an open, honest self-assessment of the organisation's performance across all its activities. The assessment completed showed that services generally have a corporate governance arrangements in place. Issues identified through the review are provided in an action plan in the report. At the back of the report, we have provided an update on the previous year's actions, which are in table 1 of the report. There was 5 actions last year, and 4 of those we're carrying on forward into next year. So table 2 are a further 8 actions that we have identified through the review carried out this year, as well as the actions that are ongoing from last year. The progress of these actions will be reported back to this committee at the end of the year, and they will be monitored throughout the year. If anyone's got any questions on this paper, I'm happy to answer them.
Do you have any questions? Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Chair. Got a couple of questions. First of all, during we've all got the same page numbers, but I'm looking at a bit to do with it's 220. This is about consultations about the budget and business plan. Now, I don't know if you can tell me whether you checked out how these processes actually happen in practice. But in my experience, that the scrutiny of the business plan and budget was very weak at best. And on the capital element, which is part of this paragraph, the capital programme, there was virtually no scrutiny. And there was no opportunity for scrutiny. It's just given a list of schemes with titles, no backing information at all. And I tried to inquire into them, and I can't see the business cases behind some of these schemes, and I was refused. So I don't see how we can say that there is scrutiny of the budget and business plan, particularly the capital programme. What's your comment?
Thank you. This review actually looks at the process in place for review of these, and that has been presented, and the opportunities provided there for scrutiny. It doesn't actually go into the it doesn't actually go into each of the areas of whether how much scrutiny is being provided. It looks more at the process of the arrangements in place.
So when we were asked to agree that and to give assurance regarding adequacy and effectiveness of the arrangements, what do we mean by effectiveness?
What the head of internal audit is saying, if I may, Chair, is that happened in practice, whether we felt it was sufficiently robust is another matter, but the factual position is as described in the statement, and absolutely this committee.
I think they have to make a judgment. I mean, clearly, obviously, if there is issues in terms of the opening process and the budget process, this can be raised with the Commission and Chair of the Commission as well. So it's obviously about governance law. And processes, clearly you've raised your concerns in this committee, but it is important that if members do have concerns about how things are working, there is that opportunity to raise it with obviously Councillor Foley as Chair of the Exclusion Commission.
But I mean, I've got a whole list of things. We haven't got time to go through all the things that I want to draw your attention to. But for one, because it happened in this committee, we reviewed the risk register last November. And we found the thing was really inadequate. There were lots of risks that have not been updated. It didn't look like
Which examples are made?
this was. I don't have a list of the examples, but if you remember the discussion we had, I'm not sure if you remember, but we had a discussion about it, and there were lots of things. Well, that hasn't been updated. This hasn't been updated. This hasn't been updated. I'm actually give you chapter and verse later, but it seemed like that. If that's effective, then I don't know what ineffective is.
Thank you. Do you have any further points we wish to raise? I think obviously I wish to raise a point in terms of obviously CRM system and the basis here. And it's went live in June
June the 24th.
June 24th.
Yeah, so 2 or 3 weeks ago on the complaints module, and then the member inquiries still needs a bit of work. But,
Yes.
we're logging through it, but not managing.
And obviously, I know we're having a complaints later on the agenda tonight, so it's an opportunity to have a discussion do we have any further points that members of the committee wish to raise here? Obviously, I see obviously actions 2024 review of the terms of references for this committee. In line with similar recommendations. Clearly, that will happen, which will be reported back to a future member of the committee. I also noticed as well in terms of reviewing this constitution scheme delegation to bring it in line with the corporate management structure, which has been agreed by council. Response to the climate emergency and failure to reduce carbon emissions. The borough proposing key officers to action climate change agenda. I knew that the cabinet member discussed this issue at full council last week. Item number 4, review of related financial regulations and procedures. They have been carried forward. Financial management, code compliance, and financial pressure. It's number 6. And also the information governance plan being updated and complaints policy very forward. Obviously, an opportunity later on to have that. business continuity plan reviewed over the next year, and the board policies as well that review undertaken in terms of any further points anyone would like to raise?
I can just make one if I may.
Yes.
254 talks about the guidance given by the Ombudsman in October 2020. This is about complaints. And it seems it's taken us until 2023 to even review our process. That seems like a very, given that one of our objectives in the early part of the report says it would be open and transparent, it seems like we've not exactly hurried in trying to implement the Ombudsman's guidance.
I think I can answer earlier in terms of obviously complaints policy that will be subject to, there is a further discussion, but I don't know if you wish to add anything in terms of that comment.
I started in post in 2021 in September 2021. So from that point, we were carrying out a review of the complaint service. We've done, over the last 16 months, we've developed the CRM system or case management system, which is fully compliant with the Ombudsman recommendations from that guidance. So although a new policy hasn't been written, all of the processes are now in line with Ombudsman guidance. So it has been a robust review, but it's not the guidance. The policy hasn't been written, but we have completely rewritten the guidance for the procedures. So I think the policy, it needs updating, but I don't think there's any significant changes in the way that we would deal with complaints. I think they're much more procedural than they are policy based.
Should we move to the recommendations then? So further comment, do we agree with recommendations?
Agreed.
Fantastic.
No, we don't agree.
You don't agree. We move on to the next item.
Majority there.
It's a majority. So can I see all those in favour of that report? Recommendations? All those against? Carried. We move on to the internal audit annual report, and I'd like to ask Margaret Allison, Head of Internal Audit, to introduce that report.
This is the annual report of the work of internal audit, which summarises the key areas and priority one actions, and includes the Head of Internal Audit annual opinion of the 500 public sector internal audit standards. In my opinion, the Council does have adequate and effective risk management, internal control, governance processes in place. This is reflected in the Council's government statement. The planned agreed audit days for 765 days, 97% of the agreed audit days were delivered. The audit plan can be flexible through the years, whether it's set at the beginning of the year, with change priorities and risk profiles. At the point at the end of the year, we completed 42 pieces of work. 69% of those were assurance work that's completed, which resulted in 79% of substantial assurance opinions given. We did provide 6 limited assurance reviews and 18 priority one actions. We had 3 actions carried over from previous years. And we currently have 6 outstanding actions, so we should progress on actions. We have been asked to ask an officer to come tonight to talk to you about the actions that are planning on the building control and the planning enforcement actions. John Berry has attended this meeting to answer any questions you may have on that area, or to provide an update on the area. I just wanted to, just before that, to say that the Council is also required by the Accounts and Audit Regulations to conduct an annual review of the effectiveness of its internal audit function. and we do annual reviews each year. This year, every 5 years, we're required to do an external assessment, and so we had someone come in and do an external assessment of our service, and they have provided us with verbal feedback at this point to say that we are compliant, and that the report will be coming up with the next committee on their findings from that review. Thank you.
I know there's obviously issues in terms of building controls and actions trying to be implemented, so I will allow John Berry.
Yes, thank you, Chair. In terms of building control, we've got a project that's been initiated at corporate level, actually. There was a cabinet report this week on Monday to review the whole service, actually, the whole building control service, because the bottom line is we need to increase our market share in terms of being competitive with private approved inspectors. And we are increasing our market share, but there are other actions that need to be done to achieve that further, and these actions are underway. What the outstanding matter in terms of this audit was about, essentially, we weren't doing as well as we should have been doing in terms of collecting in terms of invoicing and collecting payments for the applications that we've been processing for development works and the inspections that we've been carrying out on sites. The officers were doing the inspections and checking the plans, but we have a document known as VC52 document that essentially raises with the applicants the need to pay. And so we've changed our procedures in the interim. The current acting building control manager is now producing a report because we needed to separate the duties out from the day-to-day work that was being carried out by the majority of the surveyors. And so the manager has been producing a report. When we get notification that there needs to be an inspection, we check the applications to make sure that that's a fee. If they haven't, then they are invalid. We combine the inspection with raising the invoice to bring the income in. This is an interim measure, but it's working. We produced the report last week, and we think that all our income collection, our fee collection, is fully up to date now. So it's an interim measure that's working, but it's not ideal because it's the building control manager who's doing this task. We have a new structure that we are working towards filling. We were successful with a growth bid last year to boost the numbers in the team. We have had some difficulty recruiting, but by October, we do anticipate that we'll have a building control admin supervisor in, and that person will have the specific task of collecting income. So we have a solution. We are confident that we will recruit to that position because we actually have some internal candidates that we would expect to apply and that are performing very well. So that is a part of the structure we get to go to. And I think I mentioned that we're trying to do that by October. So the interim measure is working. We're going to become more efficient through further recruitment, and we hope to do that in the next couple of months. It's the update on that particular action.
And just obviously further while you're here, obviously 5.11 planning enforcement, there are 3 audit actions which are still outstanding. If you also like to add anything in terms of that, I understand a new piece of maybe some of
Yes, yeah.
that. And it's also as well in terms of the backlog has been reduced in terms of that department.
Yes, we've managed to exceed the target that we set ourselves by halving the backlog of enforcement cases. We had around about 900 last year, and we're now down to around about 350, which we think is business as usual because I'm sure plenty of you are aware that enforcement cases can take a long time to resolve for a variety of different reasons. In terms of the 3 outstanding actions from the main areas of the audit, we need to produce a local enforcement plan, which sets out how we will perform and what customers can expect. we had planned to do that by now, but what we've done is we've shared that with the new director for the department, who is happy with what she has seen, and Lucy Owen, she's happy for us to proceed. We are intending, we checked it with the legal partnership, who contributed and added bits from a legal perspective. I now just need to finalise the document and put it on the agenda for the LSG in September. That will also be accompanied by a report on the new structure for the service. We're looking to reduce costs and make efficiencies. So both of those items are going on the forward plan. So they will happen quite quickly now in terms of being progressed. Also, again, I'm afraid that our computer system, and this is acknowledged by the software provider, it's very old. I think it's about 20 years old. It's not particularly fit for purpose anymore. Our current supplier is offering a new updated software package that we are considering at the moment, but we're also looking at what else is in the market, as the chair said, to try and replace this in 2024. But in the meantime, we have improved on the audit findings. Again, it's been taken on at the management level. The planning enforcement team leader is acknowledging cases within 24 to 48 hours, which exceeds our target of 5 days. Complaints are being acknowledged within 1 to 2 days. Our target is 3 to 5. So we're doing better than the targets that will appear in the new enforcement plan. Most member inquiries seem to be being done within 24 hours. So there's been some real progress there, and site inspections are being logged, and the vast majority are taking place within 21 days. We have, depending on priorities, we have targets of, I think it's 3 days, 10 days, and 20 days. And overall, the vast majority have been done within 21 days. So we're making good progress there. We don't want to wait for the new software system it could be September 2024. So we're looking at making better use of SharePoint in the meantime. That was another one of the audit recommendations. And we have a target to try and achieve that by the autumn of this year. So that's the final piece of work to address.
Thank you. I've used my chair's property, 7.4 in terms of tenancy board. Obviously, you have got nominations, you have associations, there is space tenancy. In terms of obviously housing nominations, this is looked at not just with Clarion, but with other housing associations as well, given this is one of our major statutory functions in terms of housing.
They do with other housing associations in the state.
Yeah.
Tenancy board work. I can give you a full answer.
If you could, I mean, I think it's very important, given the limited number of nominations we have, obviously, if there's any instances do have tenancy boards, clarifications not actually made to help in terms of that work as well. Obviously, I noticed as well in terms of simplification. Any questions anyone would like to raise with Victoria, Councillor Wilson?
Just on the Children's Placements Commissioning 5.6, that came to us, I think, in the last report in November last year, and it had a target date of the 30th of the 11th, end of that month. Doesn't seem to have changed at all. I just wondered if you're able to comment at all on that. I think last time it was waiting for the DCS's signature as well. I just wondered if there's any update.
I haven't heard any further update. I think it's still with legal. It's the last update I got. So
I've just chased that myself. I'm probably over ambitious to expect someone to reply to me tonight, but I will circulate it to the members of the committee when I get the answer tomorrow.
Yeah, that'd be really great. Thank you.
Do we have any further points that we wish to raise? Yes.
I had a question about the tenancy board obviously the Magistrates Chair, and that was in the previous meeting we had a discussion about some of the members and the fraud, where actually there was not an intention to commit fraud, but the person on the waiting list had passed away and was therefore not supposed to be on there anymore, but we were, and I just want to check those numbers have been removed from the ones we get.
7.6, I referred to the housing application section, but I removed the figures from the table above. But I just referenced the fact that they,
Okay, great. So, yeah, sorry.
yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Charles.
Yeah, I was going to ask about the same subject actually. Basically, I think last time there was a couple that had been housed, they were given houses, but their names were still on the housing register. So they were then actually offered further properties. And I think there has been cases where they've actually taken the second property and used it and rented it out and stuff like that. It has something been done to address that issue.
I wasn't aware of that issue. Maybe you spoke to the head of the pool partnership. I can
Yeah,
check.
there was something.
If there's anything like that, they should be obviously reported to your
Yeah.
officers if you are aware any members.
Well, no, that was at this meeting last, it was at one of the meetings last time, and I did actually read something in the papers about it, so it is, obviously, that needs to be checked, once somebody actually takes a property, or is offered a property and accepts it, they need to be taken off the housing register. Yeah, yeah.
It's not a common thing, but I can check.
Yeah, right.
Councillor McCordy.
Just a point of clarification, under the Ford investigations, I know there's 5 bones included in it, but there were 2 prosecutions on this for an aspect. We know which bone they came from, 2 prosecutions where they, obviously the court made decisions on, on these 2 cases. Do we know which bone they came from?
Well, this report is just covering Merton.
They just come in.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not the internal one of the 5. It doesn't cover the ones you reported is to do with
Just
Martin,
Merton, these are
not
just
the,
Merton cases.
right, that's just a clarification, I just wanted to know. Thank you.
There being no further comments, are the recommendations that report agreed? Agreed. We now move on to the standards and general purposes annual report, and I'd like to invite Margaret Culliton to address the committee. Margaret.
Thank you, Chair. This is a new report for this committee. It actually came out of the CITFA guidance, updated guidance in 2022, which recommended that this committee should have an annual report on its effectiveness. The guidance, this report sets out other elements of guidance that was recommended, and I don't know, some of you may recall, or previous episodes, we circulated a skills assessment to members of this committee in March 2023, and we received 7 responses. The questions from that came from the new CITFA guidance. Most of the responses provided on page 75 were either full or partial awareness of all the areas that were raised. There were a couple I noted that were no knowledge, and they were one of them on the annual government statement, which just covered as one of the agenda items. There was one on risk management strategy as well. It may be that some of these we need to sort of incorporate into future training, or it may be that as papers come up, some additional training can be provided with papers, sort of be fed into that. Part of the guidance from CITFA also gave us suggested terms of reference for the committee, and we did a comparison of the terms of reference in the Constitution to the CITFA recommended terms of reference, which are given in Appendix C of this report, and it's asking this committee to consider whether we update the Council's terms of reference in line with the CITFA recommended terms of reference. The other point that I wanted to raise is that CITFA recommended that audit committees appoint an independent advisory member, and this sort of is to provide some external expertise to the committee and to challenge the work of the committee, and that's something that be put forward as something to consider whether you'd accept that as a recommendation for this committee, and if so, we would then look to appoint, to advertise and appoint to this committee. Thank you.
Just obviously in terms of that last point, in terms of an audit independent advisory, I think obviously it's very important to have in terms of audit, given the audit functions of this committee, which are very important in terms of the governance of the council. So I hope obviously the committee accept that recommendation.
A question on that, Chair. The recommendation is to consider whether to appoint an independent person and to consider whether to recommend to council in terms of reference. Are we able to, instead of to consider them, to just agree them?
I think they have to be considered by council. Council obviously governs us in terms of the overall structure. This is a report that needs to go to council. Obviously, we make that recommendation.
So we would
I
be-
just finished obviously, so I was that, it's that we obviously make that recommendation to council.
We would be so just for my clarity. So we're if we agree these recommendations, we're agreeing to recommend to full council that both the independent person
Yes.
and the new terms of reference.
Yes, no, new terms of reference, yes. Yeah. To clarify that point as well. Councillor, that's what you want to.
Just for clarification, how does this add value to the general audit that takes place of the council's accounting processes? How does that?
Well, this committee covers the role of the audit committee, which is part of the governance arrangements. It's a very key committee to ensure that the arrangements in place in the council are robust. So having the right skills on this committee and the correct reports that come up here for review is really important.
I think obviously, I think the other thing I wanted to add as well, I have looked at the survey and there is a need for medical training, especially in relation to risk management as well. And function of this committee, I know we have new members of the work previously on there, but I think we do need to have that level of training as well provided and offered to members of this committee. Taking that on. Any other further points anyone would like to raise in relation to the annual report? If not, such that is that report agreed?
Yes, indeed.
Thank you. We now move on to agenda item number 7, enumeration of councillors, and I invite Rita Brand.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the report back to this committee as agreed from the cross-committee working group that convened to carry out a review of the current members' allowances scheme and to consider whether any changes should be made to it with a view to recommending those changes to full council on the 13th of September. We've met 3 times between the last meeting and this meeting. If I may say, it was a very constructive working group. We managed to ensure there was a debate without being without too many disagreements, or certainly not personal disagreements. And we considered the approach we took was formed on the basis first of all at the basic allowance that members receive, and deciding whether or not to recommend to this committee to recommend to council that it be uprated in accordance with the report of the Independent Remuneration Panel. The Independent Remuneration Panel is a body established by London Council, so it applies to all London boroughs. It consists of independent people who do a review on a regular basis of the current scheme of allowances that apply across London and make recommendations as to the future levels of those allowances. The last report that they produced was in January 22. They are due to report again later this year, probably in September, but the working group took the view that we should use the 22 report as the base for its discussion rather than wait for something that may not come in time to meet our time frame. So the recommendations of the working group are set out in some detail in the paper, together with an indication of whether or not those recommendations were unanimous. Some of them were and some of them weren't. But in essence, what the working group agreed, and this was a unanimous recommendation, was to recommend a basic allowance increase of £12,015 in line with the recommendations of the IRP, and to stick with the formula that we currently use in Merton, which is to base all the special responsibility allowances for people holding, councillors holding special roles, on a multiple of that 12,000. So some of the recommended increases you'll see in the appendix are based on the existing factors applied to that 12,000 and 14,000 pounds, and in some cases an increase in those factors. And it's probably fair to say it was the decision to increase those factors in some cases which wasn't universally agreed, along with a recommendation to add some new roles into the list of councillors who receive special responsibility allowance. So I'll probably stop there. Happy to answer any questions. So the recommendations are split into two main ones. The first is to agree the new proposed list of allowances at Appendix A. The second one is to ask the leader to give some more consideration to two roles that currently don't attract an SRA, namely the tenants champion and the London Living Wage champion, so there can be more clarity about exactly what the scope of those two roles are. I'd like to thank the working group for approaching this quite difficult task so constructively.
And as Chair, can I thank the subcommittee for all the work they've undertaken. And at this point, I'd like to invite the Chair of the subcommittee and Councillor Hayes to address the committee.
Yeah, first of all, thank everybody that was on the group, including Louise, Amy, Richard, Seedhouse, and obviously the independent person, Casey. I think the group worked quite well, to echo Louise's point. And there was a lot of unanimity in terms of what conclusions we come to. But I'm also conscious that we're dealing with this at a time where we've seen a record drop in living standards, the biggest drop in living standards since the time of Napoleon, believe it or believe it not. And of course, in February this year, February 1st to be exact, we became a living wage employer. Although we paid a living wage since 2013, we did actually pick up about 13 people, I think it was, who weren't actually paid a living wage, and that was obviously a bit of a heel tap that we done. And of course, the council is setting aside money in terms of dealing with the cost of living crisis, £22 million, and 2 million of that 22 million is directly to deal with the living crisis, cost of living crisis. And we have, in becoming a living wage employer, we've set aside £8 million for when we procure 40% of all people who work for the council actually live in the borough. So I make those points because I think it is a question of putting all this in context. You know, I mean, people are struggling greatly outside, but we've had to address the problem that hasn't been addressed for lots of reasons. You know, some of them laudable. For 14 years, we haven't seen it dealt with this particular thing, and so it was to us to deal where we are now, to grasp the nettle, if you like to use the metaphor, in terms of what we're doing. And I think we've done a very good job over 3 months. We worked well together. As say, to reiterate, we did have unanimous where it was obviously, you know, so we had lowest allowances in London. It hadn't been addressed for 14 years. So we did address some difficult issues. Obviously, it's all out in the documentation, but I just think it's basically two ways. And I felt like I was in a previous life, actually, when I was dealing with this grading and regrading. Done that for 25 years in another place. But you get, right, I think, two basic arguments, right? There's the hair shirt, I don't need the money, and therefore you don't need to address my problem. Of course, you never hear anybody say in a meeting when dealing with issues, this and that matter, well, I do need the money, you know, and I am struggling. And that's the case, I think, one of the reasons why we address it. Or you can have a question of largesse. And I don't think anything we're recommending here is outrageously largesse in terms of the issue that we're trying to address. I think we've done a difficult job over 3 meetings, and I'd say guided by Louise. And you've actually put it quite good in this document. It's quite concise, quite cogent in terms of what we come to. So I know you're not near this way, but I actually enjoyed chairing the subcommittees, and I'm happy to obviously stand by everything we did. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Councillor Hayes, for the hard work you have undertaken as chair of that subcommittee. And it has been an extensive piece of work, and I obviously would reiterate my thanks to all the members for that as well. Is there any points people should?
I'd just like to make some comments. I'd like to thank Councillor Hayes for his chairing the meeting. A bit of a masterclass in negotiation.
Not surprised.
We've all learned from his previous experience. What our main points of disagreement are on definition A2. We don't have any other problems, and they're in two particular areas, and it's already set out. So I don't think I need to go into great detail. But the first one is to do with cabinet. The proposed cabinet is to go from an SRA of 1 time to an SRA of 2 times. That means that effectively for a cabinet member, that's over 100%. Now, in the meetings of the committee, we talked about having a sort of a scaled increase depending on the number of cabinet members, and I still think that's a good idea. But I now think that if there's a leader and 6 cabinet members, that should be 1.5. There's more than that. At the moment, there's a leader of 9, which is the maximum amount. It should be 1 times for the SRA. So we just think that having reflected after the sessions, we just think that the overall level of remuneration is set a bit high, but we still like the idea of a tiered thing, because if you have 10 cabinet members, basically they're each doing less work than if you have a leader and 6. And 6 just happens to be the number of directors that we've got. So if the workload of the whole council divides nicely into 6 sections, then it seems reasonable that 6 cabinet members would be a reasonable way to organise that. If you want to have more, then each is going to have less work to do, and they should get paid less for it. So that's one point. The second point is it was proposed that allowances be given for some new positions, and these were deputy leader for the opposition, the deputy leader of the administration of the party already gets an allowance. And most problematic for us, the whips. We regard whips as a political function, something which parties may or may not have in order to organise themselves internally, but not something that we would expect our council taxpayers to have to fund. And so we are completely opposed to whips receiving any special allowance over and above the basic allowance they get for being councillors. And actually also the deputy position. So those are the 2 objections we have, and we've worded an amendment which Councillor Page has got on his PC, which we would propose as an alternative to A2.
Yeah, I mean, how would you like it? So send it to Richard, or
Read it out what your amendment is.
yeah, if you read it out and then in writing for your.
Yeah, I will.
Yeah, so we propose that delete the existing A2 and replace with to agree to award the special responsibility allowances set out in Appendix A, accept the awards to whips, deputy group leader of the opposition and chair of the licensing committee, and on the basis of 7 cabinet members, including the leader, the multiplier would be 1.5 cabinet members. If there are greater than 7 cabinet members, the multiplier is 1.
Thank you. See Katie Wilson and the independent by hand up, so I'll bring Katie in at this stage.
Thank you very much. Sorry. I wonder if now is the right time to bring me in, because you're proposing an amendment on a very specific item, and my comments were more generalised about the process that you've been through. I'm very happy to make them now, but I'm just conscious you've made a very specific proposal that you're considering. So if you wanted to perhaps vote on that or take that forward first, that would be fine by me.
I think in terms of this, I'm going to allow Councillor Hayes to address the panel and Councillor Oliver as well. Do we have any objections to the report before we all see discussions of the amendments. Do members of the committee here have any questions?
Sorry, the sound is very bad from right down the end of the room. I think you're inviting me to make my comments now, so I'll proceed on that basis. As the independent member to the group, I didn't take part in the voting. I provided advice and that independence for the working group, and I would echo everyone's comments that it was done in very good spirit, with a really excellent spirit of cooperation across the board. The main reminder that I gave to the working group and that I give again to you is it is sometimes difficult to make these decisions around what is effectively, the remuneration that you are taking home for yourselves, and nobody underestimates that challenge. The reminder I would give you is that you are also thinking about future councillors rather than simply yourselves. What you have to remember is there may well be people who consider standing for council who choose not to go ahead because the allowances are insufficient to allow them to do that. And it is incredibly important that councils have that diversity of representation of the communities that they serve. So in making what are, I completely understand, difficult decisions around increases in remuneration and in allowances, I would recommend that you think not just about the increases that it may feel like you are awarding yourselves or your colleagues, but the longer term potential that it offers that wider range of people to consider whether putting themselves forward for council is for them, and the freedom that it can give them because of those increases. I don't have particular comments about the individual factors and the roles. I felt that the considerations that the members of the working group gave to them were all reasonable. You had really good discussions about the amounts of work involved. Of course, those are sometimes subjective, and you're going to consider that further. But I would say that the overall process that you went through was a solid one, a good one, and that I believe that the recommendations that are being put forward to you reflect that spirit, and I think you're in a good shape on them.
Okay, before we move, any questions to the general report? I think we've probably been before we move on. So move on to debate.
It was more sort of a comment, is that allowed, Chair?
Yeah, I'll take comments now.
It's quite nice to follow some of the points Kevin made, actually. As one of sort of the younger councillors here at Merton, and looking towards the next generation of councillors and bringing in the next generation of politicians and people who want to be in public service. It is incredibly difficult with finances. I know myself that I had to reduce my hours at work to adequately devote myself to my council work. And the current allowance, as grateful as I am for it, it doesn't make up the difference. As a young person in the current climate, when you're trying to get on the housing ladder or just trying to survive in the cost of living, it is extremely difficult. And when you want to be a public servant, but you are having to sacrifice not just your time, but your financial stability, it is incredibly challenging. And so looking forward to the next sort of generation of people who will come through of all political stripes, I think what has been put forward is a very good proposal. It was noted that we did have one of the lowest rates in London, and this would bring us specifically just to the average, to the recommendation. And I feel that the committee the subgroup have done excellent work, and I'm fully in support of this proposal.
Do you have any further points anyone would like to raise in terms of this report? Councillor Aswad.
Yeah, I feel, thank you to the committee for all the work that you have done. But I think it is important not to reduce the cabinet members to 7, because I think everyone's workload and responsibility is huge. I don't think you're gaining anything by reducing them and adding responsibility to the other cabinet members, and taking into account their responsibility. I think the grading that is being recommended is reflects their responsibility basically and recognizes the work that they're having to put in to deliver the work. So that's basically what I think about it.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. I would just note that I think there was broad agreement on the Council Bush, there's broad agreement on the basic council allowance. And on the point about cabinet, I know that other councils around us have smaller cabinet sizes than me. So I think there is a possibility, and I would say I think it would be an overall benefit if this was able to go through on a consensus across all groups. I think at the minute we're not, our group is not comfortable with where we came out. So one alternative would be either we can, go forward, this can be put to vote and proceed, and then we'll probably have a different view, or it might be the opportunity for a pause, or maybe something like the leaders, could have a little roundtable discussion about whether they feel they can, that they can close those differences if views or not, as an alternative to a sort of moving forward with this report, and probably highly likely, a split in the consensus.
I think it is important that this committee does make a decision. It's obviously be subject to extensive debate with the council. Just in terms, obviously, the leader of cabinet, it's for the leader how to best distribute the work amongst the various portfolios. There is councils across London which have cabinets of 10. Some have less, but there's a number that do have the same number. And that's the prerogative of the leader. Those obviously how to distribute the portfolio. I don't think it should be for us to set a limit on terms of this prerogative. In terms of obviously the other issues that have been raised in terms of the whip. The whip does receive special responsibility allowance in nearly all councils in London. Obviously, I know your objections to that, but they do have an important role, in terms of governance. It's not just political, there's a lot of pastoral work I know goes on, and there's a lot of work involved in being a whip, which is over and above basic duties of a councillor. So I think the whip should receive special responsibility allowance. Clearly, obviously, a councillor doesn't have to take their allowance, special responsibility. That's a choice for them, which is already open to them, but I think it is important. I'd also like to say as well that this is based in terms of the London Council's independent report. It is not going the full factor in terms of that report, but obviously it's made an assessment and taken a balanced argument in terms of implementing the workload for all councillors on this council, and we know the importance in terms of basic, but obviously the additional responsibilities that have to be undertaken. Being a cabinet member is a demanding role. As somebody who was a cabinet member for several years on this authority, and you do have to produce hours of work if you are to be undertaken that role, given the level of responsibilities that exists. So I believe it is important tonight that decision is taken. It's obviously a recommendation to full council. It will be for full council to determine whether this scheme is implemented or not. Personally, in terms of allowances, I would prefer if we had an independent system in terms of allowances, where an independent determines the rate of allowance. But we are where we are. It's been determined that local authorities need to determine allowances, and we obviously work with those requirements as well. Chair, Councillor Butcher, you want to begin again?
Yeah, I'd like to thank Councillor Page for comments, and I'm glad there's sort of a general consensus across the room about raising general allowances. I understand we're going to have differences of opinion on specifics, and that's Okay, that's, the only thing I would say is I think it is important that we take a decision, because the last time the allowances were raised for 2008, 2009, it's so much has happened in the world since then. The inflation has gone through the roof. It's the allowances have not been raised since the financial crash. And quite frankly, I don't think we can afford to put this off any longer or put it into the grass or into someone else's hands. I think ultimately we need to take the decision and see where the chips lie from there, personally.
Councillor Hayes.
Yeah. I think everyone's familiar with short money, aren't they? What's paid in Parliament to the opposition. And so there's an element of short money in this particular report. You know, short money is the money this guy called Short, would you believe, who dreamed it up, that thought about funding the opposition parties. There's an element of that, Johnny, in what we're saying in terms of whips. We're actually looking to strengthen the role of the whip, obviously within the administration, but also within the opposition. And that can only be, it is a political point in one sense, but it's about making our opposition, which is the Liberals at the moment, you know, more efficient, if I can put it that way. That's not too cheeky an expression. So, and I do think, you know, we grasped the nettle in the subcommittee, and I think we, you know, need to completely, to pass a metaphor to death, we need to squash that nettle out and move on. 14 years, no, if we're not getting an increase in allowance, 14 years is a long time, as Michael has just said, in terms of everything that's taken place. Funny enough, that was the year of the crash, wasn't it? The last crash. We're just waiting for the next one. So you know, I appreciate the kind of what you're saying in terms of which, and it's up to, if you still want to take that allowance, if you vote for it, that's a matter for the Liberal Democrats. But it is about strengthening democracy, local democracy, like Councillor Weldon. I'd like some kind of independent process. But as he says, and I echo the point, we are where we are now. And it's for us now to take that decision.
Sorry, just like to make one clarification, which is various people suggest that they're telling the leader how many cabinet members they have. It's not that. What we're saying is, if you take this example, if you have the leader and 6 more cabinet members that they receive 1.5 times, that's a total of 9, 6 times 1.5. But if he opts to have 9 cabinet members, then they should receive 1 each, and that comes to 9 as well. So we're basically saying that the job of being a cabinet member, all of them, is valued at 9. You can either split it 6 ways and they get more each, or you can all have 1 each. And that's up to you. We're not telling you which choice to make. We're just saying that if you choose to spread it over more people, then clearly their portfolios are not as large, and you shouldn't come out with the same amounts. It's not so much.
I think obviously in terms of that, I have said already, but I think it's, you know, they are shared out amongst portfolios, and cabinet members should be shared, you know, as equal. If the roles are, you know, the roles and the workload, I think does need to be spread. So I don't agree with those comments.
Yeah, I think we've come to the point where we respectfully disagree. I strongly felt for a long time, and I know it might be an unpopular opinion, that we don't pay our politicians, our public servants enough. Because if you look at the private sector, if you want experts in their field, you know, if you want people with the time and people with the quality to devote themselves, you have to be willing to pay more. And I think that I think it is one of those things where you need to, I feel that the cabinet is a very important role, who devote themselves an incredible amount of time, an incredible amount of work, spread thin. They're sacrificing their own personal, private careers, you know, for a public service. And I think this is just about bringing that line and allowing us to bring through talent that we might not otherwise have access to. And I think we're going to disagree on this point, but that's okay.
I think this point has been fairly exhausted.
Yes.
Come back next week, the amendment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Councillor Page.
Yeah, I propose that.
Is that seconded? Should I have all those in favour of that amendment, please show. And all those against. That amendment is lost. Do we move on then therefore to the substantial recommendations in the report? Are they agreed? All those in favour? And all those against? That is carried and recommended to full council. Thank you. We now move on to agenda item number 8, freedom of borough nomination. You can see obviously Ivor Heller, who was for the AFC London for over 20 years, in South 2002, is recommended freedom of work as undertaken. As well as we are aware, he listens to general council.
Thank you, Chair. I don't think there's very much to add. The working group convened. It unanimously recommended to this group that this committee recommend to council, somewhat convolutedly, because it's only full council that can award freedom of the borough status. So if your committee's content with that, we'll go forward to a special meeting of the council on a date yet to be fixed. It may be before the next scheduled council, it may be on a separate date. And then if 2/3 of the members of the council present and voting agree, we award either his freedom of borough.
Right, yes, Chair, can I speak, because I was part of the working party at the meeting, and it was unanimously agreed by all 5 of us who were in the working party, and Councillor Afigina, Councillor Kupmabeya, Edward Foley, myself, Michael Patterson, and Victoria Wilson. So I endorse what's been said and agree with the recommendations.
Just like to say, I've met Ivor a few times, and I know how much work he did to promote NFC Wimbledon and charity work he's done as well. So I'll have to say.
Certainly, of course, nature. I remember the first time I met him, I was Eric Mercy. His dynamism is absolutely working over many years to get it to where it is today, rising from the very bottom of the pyramid into the football league in 9 years, which was really remarkable. Michael.
Yeah, I think it's quite clear cut. Anyone who's seen the charity work that Ivor has done, anyone who's seen him out and about in the community, getting involved, boosting morale and spirit, and what he did through the pandemic as well. It's very rare that we all get a unanimous agreement. I think this is as clear cut as we're going to ever get to one.
So is that agreed?
Agreed.
Brilliant. We now move on to agenda item number 8, freedom of the borough working group report. I'll take Louise round to introduce it, and then I'll take councillor for the afterwards.
Are you saying agenda number 9?
Agenda number 9, yes.
Thanks.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. And I think another working group, this time to look more generally at the criteria both for awarding honorary older person status and freedom of the borough going forward. So it wasn't looking at any initially looking at any individual nomination. And what the working group agreed again for you to recommend on I think to full council as well is to agree that in future when we're looking at nominations, we do need that working group. In the past, it's been, as probably in the case of the previous nominee, what they might call a no-brainer, but it's possible going forward in other cases that you want to have a bit more of a discussion about individual nominations. So that existing practice of keeping the working group going is to be recommended. I think there was a view in the group that freedom of the borough status is a bit of a kind of mystery to the public, and people don't know that it can be awarded or what the criteria for awarding it are, so that we should publicise that so that more members of the public might feel moved to put forward possible candidates. Moving on to the honorary older person, at the moment it's an automatic award for a councillor who's retired either because they resigned or lost their seat in an election to give them honorary older person status if they have been a councillor for 15 years. And the group felt that was a bit too long, and that we should reduce that threshold to 10, but also that it ought to be possible to award someone who's given exceptional service on alderman status, even if they haven't even met the 10-year criteria. And I think the group, I hope I'm right in summarising, that they also felt that although in principle it ought to be automatic, there ought to be some degree of diligence and checking before someone goes forward to council for older person status. I don't think it was discussed in the group, but has been the case in East Devon recently, where one particular councillor had been accused of sexual assault, and he still got older person status, and the council was criticised for not having taken that into account when awarding it. So absolutely, I think it's the right time for us to just tighten up our kind of sense checking before those nominations go forward. And then I think finally, in relation to penultimately, in relation to the leader of the council, there was a view in the group that if someone has been a leader of a council at the point at which they are no longer a member of the council at all, again, either because they retired or lost their seat in the election, they should automatically be put forward to full council and for nomination for all the freedom of the borough. And I think the view of the working group was that should apply to future retiring leaders necessarily. Again, as with the council can't be obliged to agree that. There will need to be a vote on each individual occasion, and we can't commit the council or a future council at this stage to always agree that recommendation. But the idea is that the threshold is met without having to have a discussion about individual subjects. The caveat I just made about sense checking those situations when they arise. And then finally, and very pleasantly, the group took the view that former councillor Janice Howard, who hadn't got the length of service that now would be required, but had been an exceptional councillor, former mayor, and a fundraiser extraordinaire, which we put for honorary status. So if you're happy to agree with recommendations, they'll go forward to council on the 13th of.
Can I firstly obviously thank the subcommittee for their work led by Councillor McCauley, and I'm going to invite Councillor McCauley now to address the panel to discuss the subject.
Right, thank you, Chair. I was part of the working group, and we discussed the issue about reducing the length of time for which a retiring member or somebody who has served less than 15 years to receive an only older person award. And we came to a unanimous decision that we have to look at the other boroughs. I made discrete inquiries from 3 boroughs: Richmond, the Royal Borough of Kingston, and also Wandsworth. And first of all, in Richmond, they do not have the term only alderman. They have a recognition of an award of any councillor who has done 4 years at the end of the term, 4-year period. A special council meeting is held where they say thank you to the individual, and they get a recommendation in terms of a framed certificate, and also for those who have done a minimum of 2 terms, they get a gift and a plaque with a crest on it, or a tree planted in their ward, or a vase, as they wish to, whatever they want to do. In the London Borough of Wandsworth, the award of only alderman is in fact 10 years for all councillors who have done that period. In the London Royal Borough of Kingston, it's exactly the same as in the London Borough of Wandsworth. So I think we were lacking behind in the Borough of Martin, and we agreed that 10 years should be a stipulated period in which we should consider councillors. We also discussed the issue of Councillor Janice Howard, who lost her seat, and she done 12 years, and in exceptional circumstances. I know myself, I was the first Black woman mayor in 2002-3, and I know the amount of work that you have to put through. I was a mayor during Her Majesty's Golden Jubilee, but Councillor Howard and myself, I think we raised the most amount of money as mayor of Martin, and she did exceptionally well in getting over 100,000. She was out and above the stipulated amount, and she did her best to raise the profile of the borough, and she was even put as an executive member of the LMA for all the work that she has done. And another thing that she has done, she has, in the last 4 years, she has participated in the mayor's committee. We look at everything that the mayors do, and also the trust board, which was formed by Councillor David Williams when he was the mayor, for every mayor to be looked at. We have a committee. I think we've got a lead dem councillor who did a marvelous job 2 weeks ago at the mayor's function. So there's a lot of work which is involved. Sometimes we have to do, well, we have about 3 meetings a month, and you're talking about 2-3 hours each time. Councillor Howard comes to the building. She's no longer a councillor, and she does a fantastic job looking at all these figures. And we go out, when it comes to the mayor's ball, we're out in the ball, sometimes for 4 hours. We do 3 journeys, 4 hours a time. So that's a lot of time. And she's done exceptionally hard work. And we feel that we should have a special council meeting to reward her for done 12 years and the exceptional circumstances for raising over £100,000 for the mayor's charity, which is absolutely fantastic. I agree with the recommendations which has been made.
Do any members of the panel have any further comments they wish to raise? Councillor
Just a clarification. Just thinking back to when this matter first came up, I think Councillor Hayes raised it originally, the question of do you automatically become, or should there be some kind of due diligence? And I'm just looking at the recommendation A4, where it says we take into account any findings made by a hearing subcommittee. Is that the only due diligence we're going to do on someone? Like, for example, the person you talked about in Somerset or Devon, wherever it was, who's committed some sort of an offence. Unless it's something that is hidden, my reading of this is, unless it's something that a hearing subcommittee has considered, it would not be taken.
I wasn't present at the group, but I didn't read this as being an exclusive, the only consideration that could be taken into account. It was just very specific. It definitely ought to be taken into account, but absolutely, I would expect any working group convened to be cognizant of those kind of events, because in that particular case, it was known. Obviously, there will be a limit on the actual amount of digging one does, but certainly if there are known factors, it would be relevant.
Do you not think wording ought to say that?
Well, I think
Councillor Cordy.
I think the discussion we had, I think what the wording is there explains is self-explanatory, which I think, to me, it makes it quite clear. If there was like a need to somebody, then obviously the working group would for that.
What it appears to make clear is if there's been some kind of disciplinary problem within the council. I'm not sure that it makes clear that if someone, for example, has got a conviction outside of the council, that would be considered.
But if it says we could add some wording to the question about other matters the group may consider relevant.
Absolutely.
Councillor Hayes.
Yeah, and thanks for John for raising that, because I didn't feel, as a new councillor, knowing a background, at least one person, I didn't feel comfortable. That's the point I was raising about automaticity, and I think it's good that you said you put some wording in there, but I think common sense says if you've been the subject of press reports, I put it as simple as that, right? You can't just say, oh, it's automatic no matter what. It has to be, and I think that's what's being taken.
The subcommittee take that.
Yes, taking that into consideration.
I think it's, if we want to add in a few extra words, we can, but I think it's reasonably well covered. But certainly if you feel more comfortable, we can do that.
And I think I forgot to mention, we did discuss the issue of people who have been council leaders if they've done 4 years.
Yes.
And, obviously they automatically get the feeling of the goal as well.
And it's retrospectively
Yes,
as
yes,
well.
absolutely.
I think it was to clarify.
Yeah.
It wasn't retrospective leaders who have served for 4 years.
I will defer to Councillor McCall on that one. Because I wasn't part of the group, unless Richard can assist, I thought they took the view that it was to be retrospective.
Yeah, it wasn't, sorry.
You were there.
I was there, but it wasn't retrospective. It's only going forward and they have to do a minimum of 4 years.
4 years.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I think obviously that some have served the council considerable length of time. I think obviously are aware that I think have,
It's not retrospective.
some of us do know, served for 8 years as leader of the council. And,
Chair, can I just clarify? It is retrospective or it's not retrospective? It's not
My
retrospective.
understanding is the group
say.
felt it shouldn't be
shouldn't
retrospective,
be.
so obviously this committee can consider a
We
different
can
view, but
consider
that was the
different,
recommendation of the group.
Yeah, it's for us to consider it here now.
Well,
Councillor Hayes.
I don't want to make a proposal, but is it retrospective if something comes to light? Is that what you're saying?
I
And I
think
was just
it's
talking about the
crudely, or
leaders.
does it apply to previous leaders of the council who may have already stood down, or only to the automaticity, to use your word, only applies to future leaders of the council when they, or to future
So-
of the council when they stand there?
So it is retrospective or it's not
It's very
retrospective?
much.
Yeah.
It's not at the moment, we're
At
currently
the moment,
debating.
It's not to the moment.
Right,
No,
okay,
yeah.
okay. But it might be in the future.
Councillor Butcher.
It might, yeah.
So if we're currently discussing whether it is retrospective or isn't retrospective, if it were retrospective, and this might be information we don't have at hand right
Right.
now, who would it apply to?
Yeah.
And is former councillor Cowd the only person who's currently a retired former leader that this would apply to?
My understanding would apply
It
to
apply to
Councillor Cowd and
and Councillor
Councillor
Judge.
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 Because
as a judge.
councillor Judge is currently a sitting councillor.
He's
And
now
it
a
is-
sitting
Was
councillor.
he
The only
the
leader?
sitting
He
councillor.
was the leader. He's
No, I know he was the leader, but we said when they
Oh,
retire
Councillor
from the
Coleman,
council.
Councillor Tony Coleman as well.
Yeah.
The other
Okay.
one, who was the former MP. So I think obviously they did used to have a
He's
service.
still, he's still.
So it would be, so there would be, off the top of my head, there would be two living people who this would apply to if we made it retrospective.
Yes. Absolutely.
Are we happy with that?
He's still
I
serving.
am.
He's still
I mean,
serving.
Anyone who is still a serving councillor would
I
have
think
to see
it
it until
should
they
be
retire.
made- I think it should be made retrospective given their level of service.
Yeah, absolutely.
Given there's only
So
two.
there's two people
Yes,
and we're going to make it retrospective.
yes.
Yes,
That
Are we
was-
happy with?
Are we happy with that?
We agree that.
yes.
All those in favour?
I
Where-
was going to say something.
No, Karen.
Yes.
So,
No, she wants to say
Oh,
something.
no, yes, I was going to say something. I mean, obviously, yes, you know, Harry and Andrew, both deserving causes.
Tony Coleman, we said.
And
yeah.
Tony Coleman
Right.
as well, all deserving causes. I would like to suggest someone else who gave magnificent service to the council down the years and was leader, which was obviously Philip Jones.
He's already got one.
He's already got one.
Oh, right.
He's already, he has 2 years ago.
Oh, right, okay,
Before
well,
you
that's
came in,
good,
before you
yeah.
came in as the president.
Oh, excellent, that's good news.
Yes.
So I think we just need to be a bit clear about what we mean by retrospective. So there are, I think there are two categories of retrospectivity. One is councillors who are no longer councillors anymore, but who were a
Yes.
leader. And I
Yeah.
think that's the
Yes.
two people that you
Yes.
mentioned. And then there are, there is at least one serving
One serving.
member who has, or two, in fact, who have been leaders of the council in the past, but they're still councillors.
Yeah.
And then when they cease to be a councillor,
Yes,
will they automatically be put forward to council for
because they've done over 4 years service.
so over 4 years service, and they have at some point be a leader, even though at the moment they're still a councillor.
So
Yeah.
yes.
So that would include Mike Brunt as well.
No, Mike's only served
Like,
2
Marley
years.
sat 2 years, he was the last, he did 2 years.
Oh, right, so
So he
you
would
would
get
do
it.
that.
Yes.
Could I ask members of the working group what was their original reason for it not being retrospective, just so we can understand before we vote to change that? Because the working group obviously made a call.
Well, we decided that we will bring it to, to the committee to discuss it with the recommendations by the officers. And if you read the document, you will sort of, obviously get the gist of what was said at the meeting.
Yes, and sort of recommendation 7 is that the working group did not wish to retrospectively apply this to former leaders. So I was wondering on what basis the working group made recommendation 7. Why did you make that decision?
I think we left it, for the group to sort of finally endorse whether it was the right decision.
Yeah. Did we discuss it?
We didn't,
Like
yeah.
for or versus, I think it was probably more how far back do you want to go, really?
I've had my.
But I don't think we discussed it. Should we apply?
We just
Okay,
decided
back.
that we leave it to the standards committee to make the final decision. That's
Councillor, would you wish to move to the vote on this? Yes.
Yeah, I was just listening. So there's two living persons who this would apply to currently. There's two who are currently serving as councillors who are applied to when they would retire.
Yes.
Clarify.
yes.
If we're happy with it.
Are we happy that it should be retrospective? All those in
Are we
favour?
happy? I think it's unanimous.
That's unanimous. That's agreed.
Discussion
Yeah.
is something we
Thank
really-
you. Thank you for your vote on that report and to all the members of the subcommittee as well, councillor Wilson, everyone else. Well, should we move on then to agenda item number 10, member complaints?
Not member complaints, just complaints.
Complaints.
So sorry, there's a miss, that's a misapprehension of the title. So this is about our public complaints process. And you've already heard from Ruth, who I'll bring in a moment, who's our relatively new head of complaints, who spent the last 20 months reviewing the service, bringing in all sorts of improvements and in a very time consuming manner in the last few months, putting in place an electronic case management system, moving from what was a system based entirely on spreadsheets, requiring an awful lot of manual intervention by this dedicated staff in her team. So I want to start with an apology for the fact that we've only managed at this point to bring the detailed information for the years 21 to 22. That's a combination of the fact that Ruth and her team have been tied up, as I've described, and a slight mistiming of the agenda cycle. The slight consolation is that the Ombudsman's only just finished doing their review of 21-22 complaints, although I suppose it could be fair to say they do it nationally, not just for one council. So we've agreed with the chair that we will present this detailed report for 21-22 to you tonight with a high level first cut of the 22-23 data, but we will bring to you a much more detailed report in November in a different format as well, slightly more useful format, taking into account the more detail we'll have by then from the Ombudsman for you to have another look at this year's complaints report then. But Ruth's the expert, so I'll hand over to her if she wants to add anything or to answer any questions.
Ruth, do you want to say anything?
I don't think so, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Councillor, sorry, Chair, we need to, before we get to that, I think we need to clarify whether we're happy for Councillor Janice Hanley. We never.
Yeah, it's all been agreed recommendations.
Yeah, but to agree a special meeting, it hasn't been agreed. It hasn't been agreed.
Well, just to clarify, you have to have a special meeting for referral and status.
Okay.
It's not a choice. The only question is whether it's before a scheduled meeting, but it's technically a special meeting or.
Absolutely. Just to be sure. Thank you.
Do we have any questions in terms of the complaints report? Councillor Charles, and that's Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, I just wanted to know, will you be able to let the councillors in the individual wards know what the complaints are? And also for the housing one, I'm tenants champion, so I'd like to know what complaints you've had, because there's probably quite a lot of overlap. Because I can't speak for anyone else, but I imagine it's the same, that I do actually get complaints from the members of the public that probably don't necessarily go through yourself, but there probably is some overlap stuff as well. So
we can give out high level information. So yeah, I don't really there would be a problem. I'm still working out the reporting.
What about the ones that we get that actually don't go through yourself? Because I mean, we all get complaints. So, but they probably wouldn't come to you, so they wouldn't form part of your report.
They should come through.
Yeah, I know, but
if
the members of the public are just don't follow rules and regulations. If they want to complain, then they will, and then they'll might come to us rather than
they should still be logged against the complaint system.
So we need to tell you that we've had a complaint.
Yeah, and I'm working with Shireen on that, who logs our member inquiries.
So that's going to be quite a big change then, because we get absolutely mountains of them basically. I mean,
I
get
mean, the
that.
ones that are to do with the actual council and take Clarion complaints because they go.
Well, all right, forget Clarion, but I mean, complaints about just about everything going. they do like to complain.
Complaints should go through complaints process
Yeah.
because it affects how they escalate once they've been dealt with through us. And we have had our wrists slapped by the Ombudsman a couple of times where they have a member response counts as a council response. And that when we're responding to complaints, there's certain information that we have to include, which means that the complaint can escalate. And if we don't include that, we get in trouble, and the resident wouldn't know how to then escalate their complaint.
I mean, so how do you get then the residents to go to you directly rather than to come to us? Basically, that's.
Well, that's all right. I mean, if they're comfortable going through, but we can tie up the member inquiry process with the complaints process. So keep you involved, and that's something that we're just looking at in more detail at the moment. There's different levels of consent which make that easier. You've got your advocacy role, and you've got your passing on information role, if you like.
So probably that would need to wait until the members' inquiry, because obviously that's undergoing reform at the moment, isn't it? And once that has been reformed, that would maybe make things a bit more streamlined. So we are all getting the same information, and we're all in the loop, and we're all dealing with stuff. So what we're dealing with as well is not being duplicated, and vice versa, really.
Well, I mean, I can help you with that. I was a housing officer in my former days.
Well, no, I mean, I'm not just
We've
talking
got
about
that.
housing. I mean, housing is probably a separate thing. So I mean,
for everything, really.
for absolute, I mean, we get mountains of complaints about absolutely everything. So you know, it's litter and the bins and this, that, and the other, the grass verges. I mean, really, literally everything. And
so there probably needs to be some definition of what is a service failure. Complaints is to deal with service failure. If people are complaining about litter, or if they're complaining about potholes or whatever, then that is often a service request. So that's different.
Right. Okay. So just pure complaints then. Right?
Yeah. So it would need to be a service failure. But we can help with defining that.
No, that would be useful, because I say I get an awful lot of stuff.
I'm sure.
I'm sure everyone else does as well. So if that could be a bit more defined.
I think
it's fair to say that it's a distinction we struggle with as well a bit when we were designing the CRM. What's the members' inquiry? What's the complaint? What's the service request? What's the request us for information? So that system is supposed to make some clear delineations where it's possible, and sometimes it's not. But absolutely, if something comes in as a members' inquiry to Ruth and actually it's a complaint, her team, she manages members' inquiries as well. So her team will make sure it gets into the right pathway, and that will be easier when we introduce the case management for members' inquiries, which is a step behind. But what has occurred to us as putting the process in is that I think members definitely, once we got it kind of bedded in, we definitely, I imagine, benefit from a session taking you through the process and when it's best to go to Ruth's team, when it's best just to refer your resident to the website to log their own individual complaint. And I think we've been a bit blurry, it's fair to say. And so I'm not surprised that members perhaps are, and obviously even more importantly, residents need to be clear about how
Councillor Wilson.
Just on I appreciate we're going to get the detailed report for 22-23 is it September or November? November. There's a little bit, you have put a little bit of commentary in there around response times, and they're a bit slow because of the bigger incidents that happened in the borough. But I also noticed the volume obviously went up as well. I just wondered, I appreciate you're going into detail later on in the year, but just any kind of observations of why you think the volume might have increased
Yes.
overall?
So before the pandemic, the complaints were about at the same level as they had come in over the last year. They're slightly higher, but only by maybe 20 complaints. So it's just in during the pandemic 2020, 2021, they dropped. There were hardly any complaints, and they've steadily increased. So the first year after the pandemic, it was about a 70% increase, and then another 30%. But it's just brought us level to what it was about 4 or 5 years ago now. So I don't think, and I would hesitate, if I can just put this point in as well, if I may. Complaints are actually quite a good thing. It means that our residents trust us to sort a problem out. So it's a spontaneous feedback from residents, and we worry more when they're too low. Our complaints are sitting at the lower end, so they're about 1%, 2% of households. 3% I would say was at the higher end. I think if we have member complaints coming in as well, it might push us up high, but we're around about 1% of households. So it's quite healthy.
Thank you. Any further points anyone would like to raise?
I just thought that was a fascinating observation you just made. It's interesting, isn't it, that a complaint is a form of engagement, and so therefore not necessarily to be taken as a bad thing.
Councillor Wilson.
So I've got some specifics, like questions on the 21-22. I don't know how easy it's going to be for you to answer them, but there's a couple around access to the complaint system. One on page 147 is around adult social care. They said they're going to be bringing in electronic and paper forms for complaints. And I was wondering if I think they were due to come in spring of this year. So just wanted to check.
The web form is on, and it's very healthy. So yeah, so that's sorted out. What I do want to bring in is paper forms, because I do have a concern that some of our most vulnerable residents may not have access to computer systems, so that would be a backup. It's social workers have all been briefed on the complaint system, but I just think we need something else to make it easy. And the same for children's services.
Yeah, well. I saw there was page 167. It talks about the Our Voice group that kind of give recommendations on what they think we can improve to make it more accessible. And I just again wondered what the progress has been against some of those recommendations. Are you still working through them?
We're still working through those.
Okay, and then one last point, if I may, Chair. The final one was in the complaints that actually make it all the way through to the Ombudsman. There was one for a child protection case that was around safeguarding concern that actually led to some child abuse, and the injustice was kind of upheld by the Ombudsman. I appreciate it's very specific, so I just noticed that in the adult and social care report, where there'd been cases that had gone that far, they then said these are the things we're doing to kind of ensure it doesn't happen again. Whereas I couldn't see that in the Children's and Young Persons report. So.
I will have to check on the case number. You can actually access, if you want to access the cases, they're all published on the Ombudsman website. If it's the case I'm thinking of, it was an extremely specific case. The person involved in that was dismissed. So if it's that case, okay. I'll have to check, but we don't get very many of those, so I think it would be that case.
Okay. But I guess it was just because in the adult and social care report, it was like lessons learned, whereas that didn't seem to be reflected in the same way in the children's book, if you're saying so.
There's quite a lot of scrutiny on the children's ones, so they have their, they're not called serious case reviews, I can't remember what they call them now. I can't remember, sorry. Yeah. But there's a lot more, there's their own scrutiny on those cases anyway, so it would probably, if it's a case I'm thinking about, it's the way the complaint's handled, and the way we handled it, rather than the specifics of that case.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
yeah, okay.
I think we know to comment. Is recommendations in that report agreed?
Yeah,
Agreed.
And can I thank Ruth Hammett for coming along and answering questions tonight, presenting the report. Thank you. We now move on to the final agenda item, is the work programme. We have,
Level.
sorry, I do. Um,
Is it okay? Mr. White?
It's in relation to councillor Beale.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So members will know that unfortunately Councillor Pearce has been very seriously ill for some time. It's been previously agreed in accordance with the Local Government Act to excuse his non-attendance of meetings for a period of time until the 13th of September, which is the next council meeting. It's possible, although we hope very much not the case, that he won't be able to make that meeting. So we're asking this committee to exercise its power to grant a further extension of time of a further 6 months. Very much in the hope that he'll be better before then and able to attend much before that period expires.
And can we send Councillor Pearce best wishes to the committee?
Agreed.
Fantastic. Dan, Stevens on to number 12, work programme. Because before you, the work programme, obviously the complaints, I think we just discussed that. Do we have any comments in terms of the work programme? Councillor
I
Roger.
just remember that the auditors saying that they won't be able to start work until October.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's
So,
happened in previous, I mean, we'll say about the audit report, it has changed in terms of the dates overall. We are obviously in the hands of that.
But I think they said that it was going to be delayed by effectively about 6 months, wasn't it? So that's not
Externally.
the external audit.
Yeah, some of these.
So some of these dates won't.
Yeah, some of those dates may not, but we may need to also as well, shift the committee date. The committee date of this committee has been shifted to the next one. Forward a week, it's been brought forward the committee date to the 14th. So I'm progressively notified, but sometimes later on in the year, dates will sometimes shifted around because of the external audit. I know it was last year under the previous chair, but obviously there would be the implication those dates have to be changed. Any further reports? Probably obviously wants to know what's the next committee date having to move forward.
Yeah.
Swap planning committee. Must that agreed to work programme?
Yeah, absolutely.
And just one final point. Can I thank Louise Rands, the last meeting
Yeah.
on standards and
yes.
general purposes. She's been out in legal the last 3.5 years, and I thank you for all the work you have taken. The heart of that part of those things. Very appreciated. And on that note, I close. Thank you.
Thank you.